Good morning. Hello, hello. Okay, Easton. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm just trying to put everybody in attendance as you log in so that I don't miss anybody. We will wait just a couple more minutes and then we need to get started. So we're We're still missing quite a few people. Wait one more minute. Okay, so a few of you have sent me some panicked emails about grades. So I want to remind you of two things. Number one, if you did not do your mask assignment, you can still turn that in for partial credit, right? So right now, if you didn't do it, you have a 50%. If you do it, you can get at least a 70. All right. So consider that. That may be one thing that you can do. Another thing that we need to discuss, and I need to get cameras on, y'all. Another thing is that if you did not do the plot and vocabulary quiz, the makeup opportunity is available. Or if you scored less than an 80% on the plot and vocabulary quiz, you also have the opportunity to retake it. So that may be one thing that you need to do. So right now your grade on that may be fairly low, but you still have the opportunity to boost it, okay? Now, I'm not saying you need to do that right away. I want you to spend some time and review it, but if you want to retake it sooner rather than later, that is also another opportunity, okay? So I just have a question because I'm getting all these emails. When you look at PowerSchool, does it tell you the like each assignment and your grade, or is it just like a general grade and no breakdown of what you have where? Having not seen it from a student's point of view, I don't know. Each assignment and grade. All right, so you should be able to log into PowerSchool and look and say, okay, I didn't do the mask, so I have a 50%, so I can do that for some more points. I need to redo the plot and vocabulary quiz, and I'm going to do it, so I know that that is going to raise my grade, right? So you sort of need to take a little bit of accountability, right, and do that for yourself. Another thing I just want to mention is that if you do email me about grades, which I'm happy to answer, it's very helpful to me if you put the section that you're in, because I have lots of sections, right? So if you say, hey, it's, Alejandro from 1B, I can immediately go to 1B and get your answer quicker, all right? But yeah, so look for anything that you didn't turn in. Look for anything that you got, less than a 70 in or an 80 in and you want to redo. Those are going to be some easy ways to bump your grade up, okay? Questions about that I can answer for anyone, privately, or if you want to just share out. I'm happy to do either. I'll give you a couple of minutes in case anybody has any questions. Does that make sense? Yeah, thumbs up if it makes sense. Thumbs up if it makes sense, y'all, please. I need some kind of response. All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So yes, check to see what you didn't do. Check to see what you got a low grade on. Plan on making some time to do some makeup work. Okay. All right. If you go to submit it and it says that it's not submitting or you can't submit it, shoot me an email. Again, just say, hey, it's me from 1B. Can you open this back up? And I will do so for you. Okay. All right. Anything else that we need to take care of? No? Everybody doing all right? Yeah? Okay. So just take a look at that. Like I said, I will help you out. And if you need any, there's anything I can do to sort of guide you, remember you can come to my office hour, right? Which is at 3 to 4 days that aren't Wednesday. The information for that is in our Schoology. So come to my office hour, just say, hello, I need help. I don't understand, right? And I will do my best to answer your question. Or if I don't have the answer, I will get it for you. But if it's about your grades, I should be able to help you out. Okay? All right. But yeah, reach out to me if you need more specific information. And I am happy to look this up for you. So today we are going to look at Oedipus Rex. Okay. Now we don't have time to watch the whole play, so we're going to listen to sort of a condensed version of it. So I have a do now for you today. So let me share and let me get my stuff back on my lower screen here. Eventually, I'm going to figure out a more efficient way to do this. All right. So do now. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Reflect on, in your journals, reflect on what we've discussed. What did Aristotle say was made the best kind of tragedy, and what did he say was most important? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes, and you can go ahead and write that in your journals. Torrin, I got your question. In just a second, I will double check that for you. I answered you, but sorry, I know that the thing went away. Give me 2 seconds. That doesn't make any sense. All right, that's your 3 minutes. I'm getting some errors when I try to sync some stuff to PowerSchool, so I will work on that later. It is possible that your grade in PowerSchool is not what I have in Schoology because it's not syncing up properly. Okay. So I will work on that. I'm gonna get that fixed in my. I have what time is it that I have off? I have from 11 to 12 off, so I will work on that. And then hopefully afternoon, your grades in PowerSchool should be a little bit more correct. So we will see if I can fix that. Okay. All right, so what did Aristotle say was most important for tragedy? Somebody tell me. Yes, plot. Yes, good, right? So that, and he said that Sophocles' version of Oedipus Rex was the most perfect form of tragedy. Okay. So that's part of the reason why we are going to look at Oedipus Rex today. So he considered Oedipus's version. There were multiple versions, right? But he considered Oedipus's version to be the most perfect tragedy produced during the golden age of Athenian drama. So in this lesson, you'll be following the story of Oedipus. And what I want you to try to do is what we did during 21 Chump Street. Your goal is to recognize and label the parts of the plot. Okay. And we're going to refer to those one more time. All right. So that's what I want you to try to do. I might be able to work on this particular class's problems while we watch Oedipus because it's a little long. Okay. So that is what we're going to do today. So just a reminder, here's the parts I want you to look for. Stasis, the world of the play as we begin, right? The who, what, where, when, why. The initiating event, where something happens that breaks the stasis and starts the plot. The crisis, that's about halfway. Something happens to drive the protagonist towards their goal. It might be kind of hard for you to find the crisis because, like I said, we're not going to be watching the play itself. We're going to be listening to the story. So if you can't find the crisis, that's okay. We'll talk about it. The major climax, where the plot concludes with the protagonist reaching their goal or failing, right? The falling action, where we're wrapping up all our fun loose ends. And then finally, the new stasis, the world now that the play is over. Okay. So all I want you to do is to take these elements and attempt to find them in the story of Oedipus Rex. Okay. Questions about this for today? Make sense? Okay. All right. So we're going to watch the story of Oedipus. I think I've started it where it's not quite at the beginning. I might have to scroll through a little bit because they give you a lot of background before they actually start the story proper, where Sophocles starts it. Okay, so if it helps you to turn off your cameras, you can, but just please pay attention because this is going to be pretty important as we talk about what makes something a perfect tragedy, as we talk about the elements of plot. Okay. And so we will begin, and then actually I'm also going to turn off my camera because I think it also helps if mine isn't streaming my video either. And as I mentioned, look for all the elements of plot.
Meaning, the children grew strong and fair, and the city loved their lord. And it seemed to Oedipus that he had overcome his fate by his devotion, courage, and skill, turning the curse into a blessing. But when Polynices and Eteocles were on the brink of manhood, another terror paralyzed the city, one that could not be destroyed by sword skill or word skill. The growing crops in the fields were struck with mildew, yielding no food to the farmers. Pregnant women miscarried or gave birth to dead children. Then, death began to stalk the living as well. Overnight, healthy men and women developed high fevers and burned their lives away in incurable pain.
What I was saying was that right there, when he talks about the a new like plague stalked the city, that's the beginning of our stasis for Oedipus Rex proper.
The city mourned. Sacrifices were offered at all the altars of the gods, and fervent prayers were raised. And the people also sent a delegation to their king and savior to beg that he might save them again. Oedipus told them that he would do all he could, but the first need was for knowledge, and to that end he sent his brother-in-law Creon to seek help from Apollo's oracle. While he was still speaking to him, Creon returned, and there was light in his eyes and hope in his face. Apollo had told him that the plague on Thebes could indeed be cured and the curse lifted, if only Thebes would purge itself of blood guilt. What blood guilt? Oedipus asked. The guilt of the murder of their old king Laius, which had never been avenged, Creon said. Oedipus said vehemently that regicide was hateful to all the gods and surely must be punished. Furthermore, he added, the man who had killed one king might kill another, and in simple self-preservation he was bound to seek out and punish a king-killer. But why hadn't someone done that long ago? Creon observed that they had been distracted, first by the terror of the Sphinx, and then by joy at their deliverance. Oedipus summoned all the people to the palace. When they had assembled, he called down horrible curses on the murderer of Laius, and on anyone who concealed knowledge of that murderer, or gave him shelter or any kind of comfort. Then he asked Creon if Apollo had told them anything about where to look for the murderer. Yes, Creon said. The oracle declared the murderer to be within the city. Oedipus then asked what was known of Laius' death, where had it happened, and how. He was told that Laius died when he was on a journey with only a few attendants, one of whom who had escaped the robbers and brought word back to the city. Oedipus observed that it seemed a cold trail and hard to follow, but there was still hope. As well as dispatching Creon to the oracle, he had sent to the prophet Tiresias, who might be able to tell them where to look. Tiresias came, a blind old man leaning heavily on a staff. But when he heard Oedipus's voice and Oedipus's question, he shuddered and said that he should not have come. What was the good of knowing when the knowledge could be of no help? He would say nothing. Oedipus rebuked him for faint-heartedness and pointed out that they stood in desperate need of wisdom. Tiresias replied that speaking his wisdom could only do harm both to him and to the one who urged him to answer, so he would go home without further explanations. Maturity and long years of good fortune had not altogether assuaged Oedipus's fierce temper. He reviled Tiresias as a coward, as a traitor, as a heartless man, and finally said that Tiresias had probably instigated Laius' death himself, though as a blind man he probably wasn't capable of actually striking a death blow. Tiresias, old and wise as he was, had a temper of his own. He spat back that it was Oedipus himself who had defiled the land and brought the plague. This answer pleased Oedipus even less than Tiresias' silence had done. He accused Tiresias of plotting with Creon to overthrow him and give the throne back to Creon, and he threatened vague but dire punishments. He added more mocking words about Tiresias' blindness. Tiresias retorted that Oedipus had eyes but could not see himself or anything else clearly, that the threat to Oedipus and to the kingdom came not from Creon but from Oedipus himself, and that soon enough Oedipus himself would be poor and blind. Oedipus still spoke scornfully, but perhaps doubt touched his heart. He let the old man go home unharmed. But when Creon heard what he was accused of, he lost his temper, began by protesting his innocence and loyalty, and ended by telling Oedipus that he was a fool and no good ruler, and that the city was Creon's as well as Oedipus's. These words were not calculated to allay Oedipus's suspicions. The two men were shouting at each other, and some feared that the words would pass to blows when Queen Jocasta hurried out from the palace to see what her husband and her brother were quarreling about. When she heard that the dispute had arisen from a prophecy, she chided them both for foolishness. Prophecies, she said, were meaningless. She thought so because her own first husband Laius had heard a prophecy that terrified him, and it had come to nothing. The prophecy said that his own son would kill him. He couldn't bring himself to stay out of her bed even for fear of that, but when their son was born, he took the infant, pierced his ankles, and tied them together with a leather cord, and gave him to a shepherd who was instructed to leave him in some wild and desolate place where the child would die of hunger or cold or be eaten by wild beasts and never return to do his father harm. Plainly, it worked. The child naturally was never seen or heard of again, and Laius lived to be old and then got himself killed by strangers at a place where 3 roads met. Oedipus started at that, and Jocasta looked at him in puzzlement. A place where 3 roads met? He asked. Was she sure of that? What place might that be? It was near Delphi, she said. Oedipus's face grew paler. When? He asked. When did it happen? Not long, Jocasta said, before Oedipus arrived to save them from the Sphinx. How did she know where it had happened? He pressed. The servant who had survived the attack told her all about it, she said. He was a trustworthy man, though no longer a servant. Very early in Oedipus's reign, he had begged her permission to leave the city and become a shepherd in a remote area, and she had granted it. Oedipus, tense and sweating, urged that the man be called promptly, and he told Jocasta and the listening people about the old man in the chariot whom he had killed in a dispute over the right-of-way. She shook her head. No, it couldn't be the same man, she said. The servant said Laius was killed by strangers, plural. While they waited for the servant's return, another messenger, tired and travel-stained, hurried to the palace and sought audience with the king. He bore urgent news, he said, from Corinth. King Polybus had died, and the widow Queen Merope implored her dear son to come home and to reign. Oedipus wept for Polybus's death, but he said also that at least he was glad to have escaped the prophecy which said he would destroy his father. Still, while Merope lived, there must be some danger of that other shameful prophecy coming true. What other prophecy? The messenger asked. Oedipus explained. He was offended at first when the messenger laughed. Had Oedipus really exiled himself from home all these years in fear of that? The messenger asked. It had been quite unnecessary, for Oedipus was no bloodkin to either Polybus or Merope, being a foundling. The messenger himself had received the child, who was later named Oedipus, in trust from another servant, and had taken him to the childless royal couple, who pitied him for his abandonment and his injured feet, and who vowed to raise him as their own son. Who was that other servant? Oedipus asked. The messenger described him, and someone in the watching crowd said that sounded like the same man who had brought word of Laius's death. Jocasta interrupted, telling Oedipus to inquire no further. Her words were calm, but her looks were wild and her voice unsteady. Oedipus thought she was afraid that he was lowborn and she'd feel ashamed by being his consort. He reproached her for her finicky pride. She hissed that he didn't understand anything, and she hoped he never would, and she ran into the house. The messenger, probably meaning to be reassuring, said there was no need to search for the servant who brought him the child. There the man was now, that shepherd who was coming toward them, led by one of the king's own servants. The messenger smiled, but the shepherd looked wary, and when the messenger started to ask him about the foundling child, the shepherd shouted at him to be quiet. Oedipus was angry now with the cold anger of fear. He told the shepherd that he intended to have the whole story. When the shepherd tried to refuse, Oedipus threatened him with torture. When he pleaded his old age, Oedipus called servants to twist his arms behind his back and hold him steady in case more forceful means of persuasion were required. The shepherd spoke then, bitterly but truthfully, telling Oedipus that he had the child from Jocasta's own hands, saying that he should be left to die rather than living to endanger his father. But the shepherd pitied the child and thought it best to take him far away and put him with kind working people, where he'd have a chance to live but would never bring danger to his father's house. And the kind working person he selected was the messenger, who, he had just learned, had brought the child to Polybus and Merope for fostering. Oedipus stared at the old man in horror, finally understanding. All things come true, he said hollowly. I married the woman I should not have married. I killed the man I should not have killed. He ran into the palace then to confront Jocasta, his mother and his wife, with his new knowledge. He found her dead. She had understood the truth earlier than he and had hanged herself. He stared bleakly at that sight, and then before the servants could restrain him, he blinded himself. When he stumbled back outside, his people shuddered at the sight of him. He begged them to take care of his daughters, and for his own part either to kill him or to drive him out of the city. Like Orestes, he felt the curse closing in on himself, but hoped still to lift it from his native land. But Creon led him back into the palace, still wailing bitterly for his parents and his children and himself. So it was when Oedipus.
Okay, so I know it goes kind of quickly, but what were you able to pick up? And then we're going to go back through it, okay? There we go. Start my video too. Okay, so what were we able to pick back up?
That the son lived.
Okay, all right. And who's the son? Yes, Oedipus. Yeah, okay. So let's start at the beginning, all right? Let's start with the stasis. So where are we at the beginning of the play? Where are we at?
No, not Greece, isn't it?
Well, we're in Greece, but we're going to try to be specific, right? Did anybody catch what city we're in?
Delphi?
No, the oracles in Delphi, but
Oh,
okay, so let's see if it says it, because it might start it later.
It seemed to Oedipus that he had overcome his fate by his devotion, courage, and skill, turning the curse into a blessing. But when Polynices and Eteocles were on the brink of manhood, another terror paralyzed the city.
Okay, so I don't think they say. So they're in the city of Thebes. Yes, Vincent, good, right. So they're in the city of Thebes, okay? So that's our who, right? Or that's our where, okay? We're in the city of Thebes. So what's happening in the city at the beginning of the play?
a new plague was brought over.
Okay, so there's a plague in the city, right? Okay, a plague in the city. And yes, good. So we have a plague that's raging the city. And you see in the, here, I'm going to mute this, but you see it's like the crops are all dying, right? Then they say that the women are they're having miscarriages, right? Or they're having stillborn children, and then people start dying, right? So there's a plague. So our who is that? We're talking about Oedipus, right? Our where is, we're in Thebes. When, we don't have a precise time, right? That's okay. Now, the Greeks would have been able to sort of pinpoint where it was in the story because they knew the story so well. Kind of like if a story that most of us know, like if I started talking about something that happened in Harry Potter, you could probably be like, oh yeah, that's in book 4 or whatever, right? Okay, so there's our when. We don't know yet why the story is being told. The Greeks would have known, right? Because they know the story, okay? So that's our stasis. We're in Thebes, and there's a horrible plague happening, okay? So Oedipus decides to do what? What does he decide to do with the plague? There's a plague happening.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Seek knowledge. Yes. Okay. And so he's going to seek knowledge by doing what? Send the guy to the oracle. Okay, so the guy is his brother-in-law. Okay, and his name is Creon. All right, so he sends Creon to the oracle, right? And the Creon comes back. And what does Creon say? Sort of says on this. How about Cash? Okay, Zion says it can be cured, right? Cash, how are they going to cure it? You there? I see you moving. How are they? I'll type it because he can't hear me. What do they have to do? Well, they've tried sacrifices and that didn't work, right? Who can help Cash out? What do they have to do to get rid of the plague?
Don't they have to find the person who like killed the previous king? Right?
Yes. Okay, good. So that's our initiating event, right? Oedipus wants to get rid of the plague, right? And Creon says, well, guess what? It says right here, the guilt of the murder of their old king Laius, who had never been avenged. So Laius was the king before Oedipus, and he had been murdered, and they never found out who did it, okay? And so that is why the plague's happening, right? So here's our initiating event. Now Oedipus has a goal, right? Oedipus has a goal, and that goal is to find the person who killed Laius. Is this making sense? People starting to understand this? Yes? Okay. So, what does he start doing? Alejandro, tell me something that Oedipus does. He's trying to find the person who killed Laius. What does he do? What's one of the things he does? Alejandro, that sort of happens later, but not yet. We're trying to go in order. Okay. So what's the first thing that he does? Bennett. What does he do?
He brings everyone to the palace.
Okay, so he brings everybody to the palace and he starts sort of interrogating them, right? So it says he summoned all the people to the palace, right? And he starts yelling at them, and he's basically saying that, you know, it was horrible that when the king died, you guys didn't do anything, right? Now, the reason why they didn't do anything was because there was like a sphinx in their city, like terrorizing everybody, right? But he doesn't say anything about that. He basically says, you didn't do anything. So he says, go and question everybody. Anybody who knows anything about the murderer, you got to tell me or be cast out forever, right? Okay, so that's the first thing he does. What's the next thing that he does? Let's see. Peyton, do you know? Do you remember what the next thing he does is? So he's talked to the people. Then what is he going to do? Okay, so he wants to find out himself. How is he going to find out? He sends for somebody else. He sends for somebody specific. Does anybody remember who he sends for?
The servant?
That's a little bit later. The first person he sends for is, yeah, he talks to Creon. You're right. Where is it at?
Was it called Zion? Said the blind man.
Yeah, exactly. So he sends for a seer. Yes, Peyton, correct. The blind man, a seer, whose name, I don't know if they tell you or not, is Tiresias. It doesn't really matter. But when you see him, let me show you a picture of what he's usually, what he usually looks like. So yeah, here's a picture of him. He's a blind seer. They often use, there he is there. A lot of times they talk about how seers, right? People who can sort of like see the future, they make them blind. So it's like they're blind in real life, but they can see the future, right? So he sends for him and he says, okay, if you're so powerful, like, why can't you tell me who killed Laius, right? Like, you know, because that's a plot hole, right? There's a seer. Like, come on, why can't you tell me, right, who killed Laius? Right here he is. Yeah, the prophet Tiresias, okay? And Tiresias basically says, you don't want to know, I don't want to tell you, and I don't have to tell you, right? Why doesn't he want to tell him? Because he knows the truth, right? And he doesn't want to tell Oedipus the truth. So then Oedipus, Mario said, talks to Creon, right? And Navi said that too. He talks to Creon next and he says, well, surely Apollo told you more, right? Apollo must have said something else. And Creon insists, no, he didn't, right? And Oedipus sort of becomes convinced that what's going on? What does he think that Creon's trying to do?
Kill him?
Okay. So he thinks that Creon has something to do with maybe killing Laius, maybe trying to get rid of him, right? So then who do we meet? They're yelling at each other, and who do we meet?
Or do you want someone else to go?
What did you say?
Do you want someone else to go, or do I go?
Yeah, who do we meet?
Wait, me or?
Somebody else.
Okay.
Before we meet the messenger, we meet one more important person. You're right, though, Zion. We're going to meet the messenger soon. So Oedipus and Creon are fighting. Yeah, the queen, Queen Jocasta comes out, right? So we get pretty far into the play before we meet Jocasta. So she hears that her husband and her brother are about to basically start punching each other on the palace steps in front of everybody. And she goes out, right? And she tells them that they're acting like idiots. She tells Oedipus, you know, there's no way Creon did this. She tells Creon, like, Oedipus doesn't know what he's under a lot of pressure. He doesn't mean to say these things. So, like, everybody go home, everybody chill out, right? So Oedipus then starts talking to Jocasta and saying, wait, you were married to Laius. What do you remember about when he died? Okay. And she tells him what? Giselle, do you remember what she tells him? Yes. Okay. Navi says it. Giselle, do you remember too? Navi said it privately, so I want to see if Giselle remembers too. Oh, okay. Okay. She can't. She's having a lot of lag. Okay, so Navi tells us that that Jocasta tells him about the place that three roads meet. So I want to play this part for you so you can hear again why it's important, okay?
Bring himself to stay out of her bed even for fear of that. But when their son was born,
Okay, so
and
blah,
never
blah,
heard
blah.
of that?
Okay.
What place might got himself killed by strangers at a place where three roads met? Oedipus started at that, and Jocasta looked at him in puzzlement. A place where three roads met? He asked. Was she sure of that? What place might that be? It was near Delphi, she said. Oedipus's face grew paler. When? He asked. When did it happen? Not long, Jocasta said, before Oedipus arrived to save them from the Sphinx. How did she know where it had happened? He pressed. The servant who had survived the attack told her all about it, she said. He was a trustworthy man, though no longer a servant. Very early in Oedipus's reign, he had begged her permission to leave the city and become a shepherd in a remote area, and she had granted it. Oedipus, tense and sweating, urged that the man be called promptly.
Okay, so what is this about the place where three roads meet? Right here. I know you know, Mario. Let's see if anybody else does. What is this happening? Okay, Zion, that's where his father died. Yes. But what else does he know about this place where three roads meet? You're correct, Zion. It is his dad, but he doesn't know that part yet. Okay, good, Mario. Yes, Haley. There we go. Yes. No, so Haley says that's where Oedipus, knows that he killed somebody. Okay. So Jocasta says, oh yeah, Laius, he was murdered in this place where three roads meet. And Oedipus is like, what place where three roads meet? Because he knows that he committed a murder in that place. That's our crisis. Why do you think it is? Why do you think that's the crisis? What's unique about that moment? Because they found out about the murder, okay? He figures that he killed Laius. He doesn't quite know that yet, but yeah, he knows for a fact Not just hearsay, not just talk of from other people or gossip. Oedipus knows for a fact that he killed somebody there. And he knows from Jocasta that that is where Laius died, right? So that's the crisis, because it's information that Oedipus knows from his own brain, right? Does that make sense why that's the crisis? Thumbs up if it does, or tell me yes in the chat if I can't see you. Okay. Right? Because it's a big change, right? We talked about like that's the no turning back point. Now Oedipus goes from like, who killed Laius? Who killed Laius? To like, whoa, he died where I killed somebody. You know? He knows now it's a possibility that he actually did it. So he sends for the shepherd, the person who survived, to question him. And while they're waiting for the shepherd, a messenger rolls up, and the messenger tells him what? This messenger right here comes up and he's like, no, not about his son. Anybody remember what this messenger right here tells them? He has someone to help him. Okay. Let's watch this part.
From Corinth, King Polybus had died, and the widow queen Merope implored her dear son to come home and to reign.
Okay, so Oedipus is told, your dad is dead and your mom wants you to come home. And Oedipus is very excited about this because it means that the prophecy that he was told that he was going to kill his father and marry his mother didn't come true, right? But the messenger has more news for him. What does he tell him after that? Yes, Zion, exactly. That he was adopted. And now Oedipus is freaking out, right? Oedipus is freaking out because he thinks, oh my gosh, like, I don't know who my parents were. Yeah, he was adopted. Yes. Polybus and Merope adopted him. They got him from the messenger years and years and years ago, right? And yeah, the messenger was given Oedipus as a tiny baby, and he took him to Corinth, and Merope and Polybus adopted him. And Jocasta runs into the palace, right? Then the shepherd shows up, and the shepherd tells them what? Where did the shepherd tell? What's the shepherd tell him? Where did he get the baby? Where was the baby from? He was supposed to put the baby, yes, the shepherd says Jocasta sent the baby away and the baby was hers. So now Oedipus learns that Jocasta tried to have him thrown on a hill to be killed, but instead he went to Corinth and was adopted, and then trying to get away from the prophecy, he came back to kill his father and marry his mother. Yep. So the prophecy came true. So remember, we talked about tragic fate, right? Jocasta and Laius are told, your son is going to kill his father and marry his mother, and they have a baby anyway. Then they try to have the baby killed, right? And the baby ends up being adopted in another country. He grows up and Oedipus is told, you're going to kill your father and marry your mother. So he runs away. And in running away, he ends up doing exactly that. So that's our tragic fate, right? No matter how you try to get away from it, you can't. So that's our major climax, right? So what happens? What happens to Jocasta? Yep, she commits suicide. She commits suicide. What does Oedipus do? Takes his own eyes out. He blinds himself. Right. He blinds himself. Tells everybody to protect his children, right? Because they were innocent. They didn't, wasn't their fault. And then he is essentially banished. Yeah, exiles himself from the kingdom. Good job, Zion. Okay, so that's the story of Oedipus Rex. So, who's the protagonist? Who's our main character? Who has the goal? That's one of the key things. Remember, the protagonist has a goal. Okay. So Oedipus is the protagonist. Now here's a question. Who's the antagonist in this? This is a hard one. Yeah, the antagonist is a difficult one, right? Because really you can argue two things. You can either argue that Oedipus is his own antagonist, or you can argue that it's his tragic fate, right? The prophecy, okay? You can make arguments for both, all right? So, how do you feel like you did? Pretty decent, okay? All right, so practice this when you're watching episodes of television or a movie, okay? Practice this. The more you practice, the better off you're going to be. Now, not everything uses it, right? But the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Any questions before I talk to you about just a couple of some housekeeping? Okay, so consider retaking that plot and vocabulary quiz, and we're having a meeting, actually, I just found out this afternoon, where we're going to fix Power School. So your grades in Schoology are actually probably more accurate right now if you have access to looking at those, and we're going to get that stuff fixed today in Power School. There is, if you look in the 914 folder, a document called Communication Rubric and an assignment called Self-Assessment. All I need you to do is download that communication rubric and take a few moments, shouldn't take too long, to assess yourself how you're doing in all of the areas that it talks about. And then just save that and submit it under self-assessment, okay? That's all I need you to do. It's basically just full credit if you do it, and you don't get any credit if you don't do it. So it should take you just a few minutes to do it, okay? And do that real quick. I think I have it due by, I don't remember actually off the top of my head. Let's see. Might be Friday. Oh, wrong folder. It's right here at the bottom. Yeah, it's due by Friday. You're going to turn it in right here at SLA self-assessment. So you'll fill this out and then turn it in here. Okay. Like I said, shouldn't take you more than a few moments. I just want to see how you think you're doing with communication in class. Okay. And it's just about your self-assessment. And then we'll do this a couple of times throughout the semester so that you can sort of see how you're doing, what you need to work on. Like I said, it's just full credit if you do it and no credit if you don't. So just takes a couple minutes. Questions, concerns, anything I can answer for you. So we don't have an exit ticket for today. I wanted to give you a couple of minutes for that that self-assessment. Please remember though, the grades are gonna look a little different. Self-assessment, right here at the bottom here, right here. Fill this out and submit it right here. So I put it right underneath. You don't see it? Okay, let me edit it and see if I can. It's enabled, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually enabled because oh wait, that's right. I have to edit. Right. It says it's enabled. Oh, sorry. All you see is scholarly habits? Are you in the 914 to 918 folder? What? Self-assessment for the 20th. What? Oh, that's the old one. Do you see this one? The 18th? Let me preview it. The other thing to remember is that your journals are due this week, and I'm going to give you an extra day. So let me edit that right now. I want you to turn them in by Friday. Let me save that. So journals are due. I don't understand why. I see one for the 20th. I don't understand why you see one for the 20th. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's under 918. Oh, I'm in the wrong freaking folder. You guys aren't 3A. You're 1B. Sorry, I'm very tired. Okay, yes. Okay, fine. Good. Excellent. Scholarly habits is the one that I want you to do. So at the bottom, you do this rubric, fill it out. Journals aren't due until Friday. Yes, the rubric, you download it, you fill it out, submit it to Scholarly Habits. That's it. That's all you got to do. Download this right here, fill it out, and submit it under here. Ignore the self-assessment. I'm gonna delete it. It's gone. Delete. Problem solved. What happened was we had to move them around, and so I think I like accidentally duplicated it. Like all the other classes didn't have it, but your class did because I did it for you guys first. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's over time. I know that was confusing, so I will type it up and I'll email it to everybody. Okay. So go have your break. I will see you on Friday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.